You're listening to a download from the outdoorstation.co.uk. Number 545.
Hello and welcome back to the Outdoors Station. This is a continuation of the recycled 2006 10-part TGO Challenge series, which for some reason is missing from the current listing. Sadly, certain voices you hear, such as Andy Howell, Steve Perry and a few others, are no longer with us. 2006 seems like a long time ago now. However, although equipment that people use may have changed, the spirit, the emotion and the adventure the challenge represents will always remain the same. So for those who like long distance trail diaries, enjoy.
Hi, I'm Lorraine McCall and you're listening to Podcast Bob on his long trek across Scotland.
Brace yourself!
Backpackinglight.co.uk.
The UK's first outdoor podcasting show.
Minimum weight.
Maximum fun.
Hello and welcome to this special Backpacking Light podcast 10-part series recorded as part of the 2006 TGO Challenge, sponsored by the Great Outdoors magazine and Berghaus. For those of you who don't know, the TGO Challenge is an organised walk which takes place in May of each year from the west coast to the east coast of Scotland, which is approximately 200 miles. Set up in 1980, the framework and principle is totally unique. It isn't a race or a competition of any kind. The object is to foster good fellowship among walkers within the framework of a challenging expedition. The start consists of 12 sign-out locations on the west coast, from Torridon in the north down to Ardrishaig in the south, and each challenger, solo or group, makes their way via a high route, low route or mixture of the two across Scotland to finish anywhere between Arbroath and Fraserburgh on the east coast. There's a set 2-week window to do this in, and each participant submits their route for inspection prior to departure for safety and advice reasons. The places, however, are limited to 300, and details about the event, if you're interested, and entry forms and past diaries can be found in the October issue of TGO magazine. Each participant makes the challenge as easy or as hard as they wish. The extremes can be a solitary, remote route, sometimes not seeing another person for days on end, or a route which takes in the many social events, perhaps using established accommodation all the way. Most people do a mixture of the two in different forms. This year, I undertook the crossing with my wife Rose, from Lochailort to Dunatar Castle. As we went, I recorded this audio diary to try and capture the atmosphere and to share our experience and those of the many people we met en route. The 2006 TGO Challenge, Part 6. On the Sunday, we make it out of Braemar to Lochailort Lodge, far earlier than a lot of people do. At the lodge, Bill and Stan explain the idea behind their ever-open door, and from there we go up and over to Dub Loch for yet another cold, stormy night. A distance of 15 kilometres, a climb of 763 metres and a descent of 464. On the Monday, we make a very cold, damp start via Glassholt Shield Bothy to Sheelan of Mark Bothy, and then down into that wonderful, cosy haven of Tarfside. A distance of 32 kilometres, a climb of 849 metres and a descent of 1,301. At Glassholt Shield, we get to hear about the free gourmet night which Shirley, Steve and Lorraine somehow managed to innocently walk into. But first, Lee Wells chats to us en route to Lochailort Lodge. Well, it's turned out to be another nice morning, although the weather forecast for the next couple of days, Sunday, Monday, is looking a bit iffy. I'm currently strolling up to Lochailort Lodge from Braemar and bumped into Lee Wells, who was a person I got to know very well last year. And so we're just touching base really and just finding out what's happened the last few years and how the trip's gone. We're heading up to Lochalata Lodge, where we might have a bit of a break and then perhaps head over towards Loch Nagar. So firstly, Lee, how's your trip been this year?
Yeah, very well, thanks Bob. Yeah, very well.
You started a day later due to going to see Mr. Eric Clapton, I believe.
I did, yes, yeah, but that was well worth it. Well worth it.
So you started from Loch Ilort, wasn't it?
Yes, yeah. Loch Ilort, went up to Loch Beeraid and camped there. Yeah, good campsite.
And then over to Glenfinnan, and just take us through a few days from Glenfinnan to Braemar.
Went from Glenfinnan down to Connor Glen, which is a beautiful wide open glen, and across the Corran ferry to Inchery, where I had a nice bed and breakfast and a bath. It was very nice. Then up to Loch Elid Moor, which is a really nice camp there near the loch. Then over to Ossian, where I camped at the east end of the loch in a very wet, extremely wet night. Then walked through to Dalwhinnie, where I stayed at the inn there and had a few pints of Guinness and a bed and a bath again. And then walked through to Glenfeshie, stayed at the bothy there, which is quite comfortable. Then made my way through to Braemar.
Via White Bridge, presumably?
Via White Bridge, yeah, camped at White Bridge, yeah, quite a windy camp, but dry. You know.
What was the path like between Dalwhinnie and Glenfeshie? Because the last time I went over there a couple of years ago, it was very heavily stone-ridden.
No, not too bad really. Yeah, I found it quite a good path really.
So it wasn't tough on your feet at all? Then?
No, not too bad. Not too bad. Any sections a little bit boggy. Not too bad.
So have you found the weather this year? Has it been kind to you like the rest of us?
Yes, yeah. On the whole, I think we've done very well really, and quite mild nights, and not too wet days really.
Gear-wise this year, you were saying you've changed a few things over. So you've got a nice new Osprey pack there. And the weight, when I picked it up a few minutes ago, does seem to be very, very good. So have you cut back at all on anything particular?
Yeah, I've had 3 food parcels sent on this year instead of 2, which helps quite a bit. And try to be a little bit more careful with other things. But my new pacer poles seem to take the rest of the weight off me knees and back, which I'm really pleased with those. Keep me motoring on.
You were saying that you've actually found it quite social this year. You've bumped into a lot of people over there since you started, because sometimes you can sort of go several days on end, can't you, without meeting anybody?
That's right. I've started sort of a day or so earlier this year than in the past, so I've really caught up with everybody along the way, which has been very nice, you know, and enjoyed more of the social side as I've done in the last 2 years.
And what did you make of the big Braemar party last night?
Yeah, big is the word. A lot of people, a lot of drink taken. But I left the party at 10 o'clock and before I got into too much trouble.
Still in full swing. Excellent. So I think you're joining us and we're heading over to Loch Ilort today. So we'll see how the weather treats us.
Yeah, that's it. I'll enjoy your company, Bob.
At Lochalata Lodge, Bill and Stan are an institution in the annals of the challenge. Their names and reputation gets into many diaries, comments on the web, and is passed in hushed, hallowed tones from challenger to challenger. The reason is their ever-welcoming hospitality which awaits the weary traveller at Lochalata Lodge. They never refuse a hiker a cup of tea.
Most of the time, yeah. If somebody,
Most of the time, yeah.
If somebody passes through, we'll give them a cup of tea.
Yeah.
We wouldn't have anybody walking past without getting a cup of tea. You know, that's what our reputation's built on, that, isn't it? Tea.
So do you live here permanently all the time, or is it?
No, weekends. We got the cottage about 15 years ago, and we've been working on it ever since. And we just meet people that come to stay in the MBA bothy next door. You know, so
Right.
we'll always have them in for a cup of tea and a chat. You know,
Yeah.
the company's good.
Yeah. You met some good people on the way through, very interesting
Absolutely.
people.
Yep.
Yeah. And you've been doing the challenge, obviously feeding and supplying
We've been
tea for
doing
the
it
challenge.
for a lot of years.
A lot of years.
Yeah.
A lot of years.
Now, what's this about here about a rumour that sometimes in the evenings a bottle of whiskey is opened?
Sometimes it has been known, yeah.
It has been known, aye. But
You've got to let it open. You've got to open it to let it breathe.
I'd breathe.
Let it breathe, and once it starts to breathe, you've got to catch it before it evaporates. So it ends up the bottle's empty. So you've got to start all over
Quite
again.
a few of them.
It's tragic,
Yes.
but you've got to put up with.
Well,
Somebody's got to do it, Bill.
Absolutely, absolutely.
yeah.
So that's basically about it.
Yeah,
It just-
yeah.
It doesn't cost nothing to be polite. And,
No, hospitality is a great thing, especially in the hills. Like you say, the people you meet are absolutely fantastic, And some of the guys has been coming through for years, they're like old friends now, really,
Yeah,
Yeah,
You get everybody's stories and,
Yeah,
all the gossip and
gossip.
jokes, all jokes. It's all old jokes we know. It's the only ones we
The
know.
only ones we know.
But it's great. It's great to talk to people, even people like yourself, It's great to talk to anybody.
Aye. 9
it's a
times
great-
out of 10, we're usually here on our own. On a Saturday night in the winter time, there's nobody going about, and we sit at one end of the fire. There are like 2 bookends and a bottle of whiskey in the middle, and just let it all go by.
So what's it like to live? Come here every weekend all year through. Does it suddenly pick up in springtime, or do you still get a fair few people come through during the sort of the winter months?
Winter time's actually busier.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, a lot of the people that want to go ice climbing and walking in the winter walking, they'll come up because there is a bothy close at hand to 5 or 6 Munros. They can take their pick of the Munros round about. And as I said, if we are there, we won't have anybody stay in a cold bothy at night, so we get them in. And some of the people, well, there's a pair comes up for London every year now, and they give us a phone to tell us when they'll be here, and they have 2 or 3 days here, and we have 2 or 3 days with them. Paul and John for London, they come up every year now. It's a sort of tradition with them. They have a few days off, and they're here. Well, if we are here, they're here.
And if the conditions are right in the winter time, they do a bit of ice climbing, and it's also cross-country skiing you can do here as well.
Oh, it's a nice walk from Braemar to here, isn't it? So I should imagine you get a lot of sort of afternoon visitors.
Oh yeah, you get the day trippers. They come up in droves, but I mean, well. Most of them will get a cup of tea if they want a cup of tea, something like that. But most of them just pass through, give it a wave and carry on. It's funny having the car outside the door. We drive in because we take a lot of stuff in with us. And when they spot the car, they think, oh, somebody's private house. So they just sort of circle it around the side of the wall there, and they don't bother coming in. It scares them off a wee bit sometimes. But most people know the car now. It comes up fairly regular for Braemar anyway.
And what about this part of the world as regards midges during the summer period? Do you get it bad up here with being right next to the loch?
It's vicious. It's vicious. And I might add to you as well, it's only the female midgie that bites you.
Yeah.
The male doesn't bother you. It's typical female, isn't it?
Yeah. But I understand that the best cure is the whiskey again, is it?
It is. If you rub yourself with copious quantities of whiskey, it doesn't scare them away. It gets them so pissed that they fall off you. They don't bite you. So it's a good way to get rid of them.
Yeah.
It's great.
They can be quite bad here sometimes, but it's not as bad as the West Coast, which seems to be permanently in the summertime. But here, it comes in spats, doesn't it? It's one day, Saturday morning, they'll be all over the place, and then Sunday morning, nothing. It's just. But they can't be bad, like everything else.
Depends how much whiskey you've had, actually.
If you feel them.
Well, you didn't notice them after a wee while, do you?
Get used to them.
Yeah, dear, oh dear.
Well, lovely. Well, thanks very much indeed for our cup of tea anyway, and a bit of sustenance.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome.
Before we move on, and
That's what it's all about, isn't it?
indeed, yeah, nice to have met you at last. I've heard a lot about you over the years, but never actually met you before.
Well, you're very welcome. Hey, you know where we are now. So if you're passing through this way any other time, apart from a challenge, just knock on the door and you'll be made as welcome.
Well, we're not here permanently. We do go other places. We do go walking.
Yeah, where do you go? Where do you go when you get away? You want to go somewhere?
Torridon, Ullapool, that's our favourite spots over on the West Coast. Or occasionally we'll fore into the Western Cairngorms. Up Coiling Bridge. Come in for that end and have a wander up there, Aviemore. But Torridon, yes, Bill and I's in Torridon. Not so much now, but it was 10, 11 times a year we were there. We were quite well known there, were we? We were locals.
Quite a nice place to go. It's very, very, totally different to this, of course. Different terrain, and because everything's at sea level there. They're only about 1650 here, but height. So Well, they're still quite high tops, like, you know, but they're very, very deceiving because they're all rounded, as you can see, like, you know, rounded tops.
And finally, then, what's the weather forecast for the next few days? You're obviously in touch with these things.
Much the same as it is now.
Yeah.
And higher winds, apparently.
Gonna be wet.
But it hasn't been that bad, really.
Bit of snow on the tops, and that's about it.
Quite a lot of snow this morning, actually. But it's vanished. It's gone. It's gone.
It's not hanging about.
No, it's time of year. It won't last now. It won't last now.
You're going to get the rest of the week.
Yeah, it's some cold wind. Great.
But, yeah. Torrential rain last night. It was heavy last night. When Maria and Stuart appeared 10:30 last night, I just couldn't believe it. I saw the wet faces peering in the window, you know. I said, oh my God, who's this? And I suddenly realised who it was. Because they've been here a few times, I've met them a few times. And that was a long walk for Darth Hotel to here, 12 hours, you know.
That's what it's all about.
That's it,
Yeah.
That's what it's all about.
Out for a walk.
Yeah.
And just
Just out for a wee walk.
Yeah.
Out for a wee walk.
You get a bit of breeze on the
And
way.
it took a fortnight.
Yeah. It took a fortnight. We walked across Scotland for a wee walk. Great.
We left Braemar and took the stroll up the road and then up the track to Localita Lodge, where we met Stan and Bill and had a nice chat with them. And after a cup of tea and a bit of a chat with the other challengers that were passing through, of which there were quite a few, Shirley, Steve and Lorraine left to go and find some secret bothy somewhere that has got a story attached to it, so more of that later. And Rose, I and Lee headed for Dub Loch, which is probably a good couple of hours walk really up from Localita on the Loch Nagar path, and then you bear right down a gully. And the gully was fairly damp today because it was pretty wet, I have to say. Generally it was sort of a sleet that we faced, very much like the weather forecast was implying. And we spent an hour or two going through all that, heads down, as we came down the gully. The gully itself was, well, on a beautiful day, would be absolutely gorgeous because there was this huge, great water slide. And by that I mean at least sort of 300-400 metres long, cascading through the rocks at a gentle angle over sort of sloping rocks. And on a fine day would have been absolutely breathtaking. So if anybody ever comes this way, it would be well worth having a look at that. It's the sort of thing you can't see from actually up on the path. You actually have to come down the gully to see. But we very, very gingerly made our way down the wet gully because obviously everything was flooded with water with the rain that was coming off the hills and so on. By the time we got down to the shore of Dubloch, we found a couple of lovely camping spots, as people recommended, nice couple of green areas just outside of the heather. However, we were soaking wet and freezing cold. And I have to say the temperature tonight is probably one of the coldest we've experienced so far, although the night on the top of Larrigaroo was fairly cold, with a heavy frost in the morning. All of us are feeling particularly cold and have wrapped up in all our various layers in our sleeping bag tonight. So it's 9 o'clock, and as we lie here now listening to the sound of the water sliding one side and the loch lapping on the other side and the rain gently hammering down and the occasional bird twittering, we obviously think of all the guys that are probably having a fairly hard evening at Localita Lodge and Bill and Stan's warm welcome, where they probably let another bottle of whiskey open to breathe for a bit before having to consume it before it evaporates. So cheers guys, have a good night, thinking of you, and I really need to get some sleep.
I think this night was the coldest night for some of us. The temperature dropped like a stone for a few hours, and at one stage Rose and I had all 4 layers on inside our bags, trying to find some warmth from somewhere. At times like this, you make your own entertainment, and as we cooked our evening meal, we called over to Lee asking what was on his menu for tonight. Wild mushroom soup for starters, he said, followed by tagliatelle, but I can't decide between the banoffee pie or the ice cream for pudding, he replied. My, how we laughed. Once again, the little titanium pegs held tight as we were battered by the wind and snow all through the night, and I woke with the inner tent flapping on my face. Such was the force. It wasn't the nicest of starts to the day.
Well, we've just woken up on Monday morning, and the weather of wind of last night, which was predicted 60-mile-an-hour winds, has continued all the way through the night, right through to the morning. It's about 7:30 now. We just managed to pack up inside the tent without getting outside, and we're just about to get outside. Lee opened his tent door and lost something straight away into the loch, and we're trying not to do the same. So everything is battened down now, and we're about to brace ourselves and make our way down to Glassholt Shield, where we'll sort ourselves out properly and have some breakfast and whatever. But at the moment it's pretty unpleasant because everything is still very, very cold, wet and damp. We've now made it to Shield in the Mark Bothy, and we've got Shirley with us, who we picked up down at Glassholt Shield Bothy by Loch Mick. We've only just started speaking to Shirley because she has a story to tell of, and I presume the listener will understand exactly our emotions when we heard the story. To pick up from this morning's little log, we left the site where we pitched the tent in the howling gale. It was like Narnia when we got out of the tent this morning. The whole surroundings was covered in snow, good smattering snow. The wind was still blowing at sort of 40 to 50 miles an hour. It was rather chilly, rather cold, and we all pulled on our wet gear, and we staggered down the path down to Glassholt Shield. As we approached Glassholt Shield, which is the body there by Loch Mick, we were greeted with raucous laughter from the body, which contained Steve Perry, Lorraine McCall and Shirley. They proceeded to tell us they'd had a rather warm and cosy night compared to ours, and Shirley's now going to tell us exactly what that involved.
That was absolutely wonderful. We arrived at the Bothy after quite an exciting wet and at times cold day on the hill, and then we got down to the Bothy and we found that there were people there who were cooking sausages and bacon and exciting things like that. So we went inside and started getting our kit unpacked and said hello to them, and the next thing we knew they were bringing us in bacon sandwiches and sausage sandwiches and a bottle of wine as well, and it was very nice wine, and we forcing us basically to eat them. I mean, I didn't really want to eat it, as you'd understand, because I was thinking of Bob and Rose and Lee on the hill, and I felt really bad eating all that stuff, but I just felt that it would be wrong not to.
Rude not to.
Rude, churlish to refuse, I felt. So we had the bacon sandwiches and the sausage. I didn't, of course, eat the sausage sandwich, and I only really looked at the bacon sandwich, not sure where my bit went, but I drank the wine, and then after that we sat down to make something more substantial to eat, and the next thing we knew they were bringing us in bits of steak, venison sausages, pork sausages, new potatoes cooked in the barbecue, peppers, freshly cooked peppers with mushrooms, and it was absolutely fantastic, and it took us ages to eat it all. It was quite delicious. And then after that we all sat around the fire. We lit a fire, and there was a huge log that the blokes manhandled into the fire, which kept us all warm. And we sat in there for hours and somehow managed to work our way through, I think it was 2.5 bottles of whiskey, and somebody drank quite a lot of brandy, and there was some 7-Up and lemonade and so on and so forth, and it was absolutely wonderful.
So you were warm, cosy,
we were
dry,
warm, cosy, dry,
well fed.
I mean, naturally at 5 or 6 minute intervals we kept going to the door and keeping an eye out for Bob and Rose and Lee, hoping that they would come down, and we kept trying to ring them, and but unfortunately we couldn't get any reception, and after a while we just felt that we better eat the food that had been set aside for them, because I mean, it seemed wrong to just see it sitting there congealing on the plate.
It went off.
We wouldn't have wanted them to get food poisoning this morning so close to the end of the walk.
And so there you have it, listener. That's exactly what we arrived to face, the story of the food. Initially, I have to say, none of us believed it. Then, sadly, the owner of the food came in the barbecue and introduced themselves. And we had to believe it, and we've sulked, really, for the last 5 or 6 miles. But we're now on talking terms with Shirley again before we battle over the hill and start to head down towards Tarfside. A little aside to our little story, and just to show you just how far guilt can travel. Steve and Lorraine headed off before us this morning, and they've left me a little note and a present in the Sheila and Mark bothy, and it reads as follows. Podcast Bob, we felt so guilty having the steaks last night that when we found this can of beer here, we decided to leave you some. We've only had a mouthful. The rest is yours, my friend. S&L. P.S. Make sure you bring out the empty can with you. Isn't that nice? Anyway, there was half a slurp in there, but it was worth it. The Little Haven of Tarfside is another institution on the challenge, as the organisers hire the church hostel there for a week, and volunteers, usually the partners of those in control, serve up copious amounts of tea, buns, bacon sandwiches, baked potatoes and other such goodies. It is a big social gathering where all the challengers at some stage funnel together. Rooms, of course, are available, but if they are taken, the village allows camping on their sports field, which has toilets, rubbish bins, and most of all, a mason's hall. If you're lucky, the locals will open the tiny hall and invite you in to share an evening of good conversation, a roaring fire, and refreshments, which makes this little village the perfect spot after our previous night.
Yesterday turned into a bit of an epic day, really. Best part of 20 miles, and my feet are suffering, sadly, for it today. Tuesday morning, we start off Dublock, and the weather was not on our side. It was snow and blowing a gale and very, very cold. Got down to Glasshouse Shield. We met up with Shirley, Steve and Lorraine. Steve and Lorraine went on to do their thing, and Shirley stayed with us. And as you heard, we began speaking to her some 5 or 6 miles later after we heard all about this fantastic night they had. The walk down through Loch Mick was pleasant enough. Very, very cold, blustery day and fairly overcast, but it was pleasant enough, and we certainly made steady time, steady progress. Got down to the Spittal of Glen Muick, where there's toilet facilities and also a little information centre. And for future reference, there's a little coffee machine in there as well with 50p, and you can have teas, coffees and soup and whatever else. So we had a break there for a bit, and before heading up the gully towards the Sheila and Mark. As usual, the gully was fairly steady going, and the trick is when you get to the top of the gully and the top of one particular stream that comes into it, the path takes you there, is to always take the right fork and actually go round the into the next gully, because if you take a direct bearing to the Sheila and Mark bothy, you will get caught in some serious bogs up there. So we made around to Sheila and Mark, had that nice little note from Lorraine and Steve, stopped there for another brew and something to eat, before heading off to Muckle Cairn to head into Glenlee. Again, little tip here for people listening is that the path down from Muckle Cairn is always further over to the left than you think it's going to be. So you tend to take a direct bearing straight from the Sheila and Mark, and you end up veering right because it feels right to look down the glen, but actually the thing to do is bear left and pick the path up. And once you pick that path up, it's not too far to stagger down to the stables of Lee, which is another sort of bothy stop. Have a cup of tea there and whatever. The stones underfoot were the sort of bouldery type, which roll your feet around a bit. And if you're pushing yourself a bit, this is where it really starts to hurt, sadly. And we got down Glenlee, which is a fairly long trawl haul. There's nothing particularly exciting about it, and the snow was still flurrying in the sky, and it was still fairly cold, a very cold wind down your neck. Down to Lochlee, through Lochlee, where we dropped Shirley off. There's a bed and breakfast down there that she was had heard about the House of Mark, which apparently is absolutely fabulous and does a wonderful meal. So she stayed there out of principle. And then we cut across overland from the road through via the West Bank sort of path, which is a nice, it looks like an ancient drover's route actually, to Tarfside, and you literally come straight down to the Tarfside Lodge, and which is where the ladies of some of the organisers of the challenge have set up a little sort of soup kitchen type thing. They rent the church hostel for a week, and if you're lucky and you call in there at the right time, you might find a warm bed, and a dry bed certainly, but there's also the facilities there, showers and toilets and so on, and they sort of run an open house soup kitchen, so you go in and run a bill up with cans of beer and bacon sandwiches and hot cups of tea and all the rest of it, which actually is very, very welcome after a long day. And then sort of 50 yards up the road from there's the playing fields, which is turned into a campsite, which the locals are happy for us to use, and we whack the tent up there. Lovely flat pitch, nice and warm in the mornings, which is directly opposite the Masons Hall. And in the Masons Hall is like a private club, and they invite us in, and you can have a few bevies in there, which we did last night, and catch up with a few people and have a chat before crashing back out in the tent. And the campsite's quite nice because there's a toilet, ladies and gents toilet there as well. So all the facilities are to hand, and it's actually quite a civilised spot to camp. So got up this morning, and all of us were saying, gosh, it was cold last night, and certainly it was cold last time we came through as well. I think it was -5, but last night it was definitely 0 because everybody was putting on extra layers in their bag, and we've got frost all over the tents. And a good frost on the ground, a good ground frost. So it was a fairly chilly night, but it's soon forgotten when you pop back down to Tarfside Hostel and have a bacon sandwich and a mug of tea, which we've just done. So today, all being well, we're going to head over to Charbothy, which I think will be a sort of fairly steady plod. My feet are certainly complaining. I've got blisters all under my toes, not on the toes as it were, so it's right in the corners of all the toes, which are extremely painful. But we'll plod on. Rose has got a few blisters as well, and Lee's complaining of foot problems, and by this stage most people have got some sort of challenger's limp, and that's about it really. So we'll bang on and have another night further over, hopefully at Charbothy, and then the final night will be somewhere between there and the coast in the forest.
In the next episode, we chat with first-timer Hugh Brown at Charbothy. Then we make our way down to the end of Glendy, where we have an early camp and a bit of a gear review. The following day, we also catch up with Steve Perry as we head through the Fetterisso Forest.
Hey, you're listening to One Man's podcast across Scotland, to be continued very soon.
Backpackinglight.co.uk.
Go lighter, go faster, go further.
To subscribe to our show, please follow the instructions on our website or search for us in the iTunes directory.
Thank you, and good night.
Oh, that was good.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To hear or see more from our extensive free library, please visit theoutdoorstation.co.uk.